Is from a Newcastle United perspective, though, let's talk about them for a moment. It's kind of hard to see where Newcastle United should feel or how they should feel after that, because Nobby, you said it was a great performance in the first half. They came into this one high on confidence, but you come out with a loss at the other end. Were they positives that you can take out more than negatives from the game?
That's what I'm saying. You know, I believe Newcastle get in great position, been winning 2-1. This should keep going in the same performance as it been before the end of the match. But it looked like they are quite happy and comfortable just to hold in the results. Even you can see Eddie doesn't make many changes. They kept the same team until 80 minutes.
Well, it can't really make much changes. They haven't got anybody on the bench, really.
Well, I mean, that's the next thing, the next step for Newcastle to need to be aware of all these things. You in a lot of expectation. Now you've been in the Champions League, so you need to make sure your bench has to be available. Like Manchester City is the best example. I know it's difficult to compare because this club been for so long like this, but that's made sure to Newcastle need to improve his bench. I know it's a lot of injuries. No make the excuse because happen to any club, any team, but they need to make sure to improve a little bit to players when they come on to make things happen to change the game.
Gary?
Yeah, I think it's. I think in many ways Newcastle can be quite proud with a lot of this performance. A lot of the time they managed to go toe-to-toe with the best side in the country, in my opinion, the best side in Europe, and arguably now the best side in the world, with their recent World Club trophy that they picked up. But Newcastle are behind Manchester City by a number of seasons. You know, City have been building to where they are now for a number of years. And Newcastle are trying to build in that direction, and they're very new to this. I think they overachieved last season, which has its pluses, but it also has its minuses because then expectation is really built. And, you know, of course, the other thing is that it takes time to get the players in that you want. And I know that Newcastle have spent something like 400 million on players under the new ownership, which is quite substantial. But it's you know, not in the same league as what Manchester City have spent. And again, the turnover of these respective clubs as well. Manchester City's turnover is 3 times the amount of Newcastle's. So again, you have potential difficulties with financial fair play and that aspect of running a football club as well.
That's the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's the injuries and the lack of bodies in general, and also qualities in bodies, is the one that's costing Newcastle United at the moment. They sit in mid-table, which is not a position Newcastle want to be in, particularly after what happened last season. But Nobby, Gary had a good point. There's the constraints of FFP. So the January window is here. Can Newcastle United do anything?
It will be difficult. I will say all the time, with all respect, when you get players from the window, supposed to be window space, window time, I will say you need to, Newcastle, start to looking for, like Gary being mentioned, to try to catch Manchester City will take a time because it's not that simple. But you need to start to building your score stronger and stronger. So I will say in January, it's hard to find some high world-class players. It's better to wait until the end of the season, see around the world what's going on, what's happened, and after from there, you need to Newcastle start to building his team. Eddie, for me, the next step, the next move, they need to go for that. You know, they need to go to try to get. But I will say all the time, I'm not disagree. You know, the engine, the way Newcastle play, but you need to. It's the best example is Manchester City. It's too easy to say that, but you need to have a footballer. To people kept the ball, get the position. I mean, to help him to win. Not all the time you can play in the same intensity, in the same way. But you need to have a good footballer to manage to hold in the ball, to make things happen in the game. But, well, that would be, I believe, the next step for Eddie Howe. He will looking around. But January always is hard. It's difficult to find players free, you know, or you have to buy it. It will be quite tough, difficult to pinch him from any big club.
Well, it's not just the buying, it's also the letting go of players as well. And with Newcastle United being mid-table and things not looking great at the moment, there's been a lot of links for players moving out of Newcastle United. Obviously, there's always been interest in someone like Bruno Guimaraes. We know his talent. We know clubs all around the world want his talent. Is there anyone at risk at the moment? Any key players at risk at Newcastle of being, attracted by something else elsewhere, Nobby?
Probably, yeah. Like you say, it depends the players' ambitions. Sometimes players want to be all the time play Champions League. Great players want to try to be successful or winning trophies. But at the moment, I believe, I would say Bruno all the time being mentioned in this situation, is really look very happy. Everybody at the moment look very happy being Newcastle. I hope so, like I'm saying before, I hope so Newcastle, maybe Eddie be available next season to bring another 2-3 more quality players. I believe Newcastle need to be a little bit stronger, dominating more with the ball. So they need to better maybe some more quality midfielders to help in the same level like Bruno Guimaraes to the team get to the next step, to the next progress into the league.
Is that the priority position for you, Nobbe, that midfield?
Yeah, I feel in my opinion, I will say Bruno Guimaraes needs somebody, around him to keep the ball, to make things happen. I don't like it compared, but you can see in Manchester City, De Bruyne, this boy, the Portuguese boy, I forgot his name, Bernardo Silva. So people like that, to make things happen. Newcastle at the moment is everything look like a ball into Bruno, and Bruno start to make everything happen. But I believe Newcastle need a little bit more good footballers around in the midfield.
Yeah, they initially had Sandro Tonali, didn't they? And then that whole thing happened at the early on of the season, Gary. But it's hard to see them being able to splash anything in January, as you mentioned. Even Eddie Howe has mentioned before, not too long ago, that they just haven't got the cash at the moment to do anything. Mid-table, it can look quite bleak for Newcastle United this season. Will that be acceptable?
Well, I think that it is going to be tough for Newcastle to acquire more players. I was reading an article from recently where one of the club's hierarchy said that, there is the possibility of trading, but, the only way you bring big money into the club is to sell one of your better players. But, I totally agree with Nobby. I was looking at it, alongside Guimaraes today, you had Longstaff, who I think is a good squad player, but he's not a tip-top midfield player. And Lewis Miley, who's a 17-year-old who's got a lot of promise and I think will do very well. But, at the moment, he is trying to fill a role that is beyond his years, in all honesty. So the business with this profit and sustainability rules means that every club now, because of what happened with Everton and the 10-point deduction, every club is now saying this profitability and sustainable rules, we have to stay within. And because Newcastle have, started to generate a bigger turnover financially, they haven't been creating this huge turnover financially for enough years yet. So the catch-up procedure for Newcastle, I think, is going to be reasonably drawn out, and the Newcastle fans are going to have to stay really patient.
Just a quick one. Someone I know spoke to me, a friend of mine suggested this actually. I just wanted to get your opinion. Should freak injuries play a part in FFP, Gary? Should it be considered in any ways, like the freak injuries that Newcastle have had?
Well, like you make some allowances for it. I think it's a consideration. I personally think that this, financial fair play and profit and sustainability is such a complicated formula that it's very difficult to control as it is. So if you start putting more criteria in there, it becomes an even more complicated equation. But you can, with bad luck, certainly get caught out. And, Tonali, who we mentioned, who they signed for I think it was over £50 million, who was going to bring some experience to the team and some more quality to the midfield. You know, because Newcastle have now lost him through no fault of their own, because unfortunately he has this gambling issue that means he's now suspended from football. You know, I think there should be some allowance made for that. Whether it will be brought in or not, I really don't know.
Should some allowance be made for freak injuries or major injuries, Nobby?
Sorry?
Should allowances on FFP be made if there is a freak injury or if there's a slew of major injuries in a team?
You know, it's hard when we outside this situation. You know, I know Newcastle, you know, in being a struggle, and it's quite coincidence when you see get so much too easy this team injury. I know, we understand, because it's a team we play with a lot of intensity. Eddie Howe, they like the team press very high, working really hard. But it's something about maybe they need to probably sort it out, because you cannot have injuries players, because, you know, it's not like it happened once to any player once in the season. Happen after 3 weeks' time, the same player come back again to injury. So it's quite something. It's difficult to say from here, with all respect. But something in there, to me, is something happened. They need to sort it out, the situation. Football, I was talking to Gary, you cannot play all the time with the same intensity. You see, best example, Manchester City, how they're resting the player when they have the ball. You see the pass around. So they give you a little bit of rest to when they have that time over the ball. When they have to go forward, that they got the engine, they got the energy to attack. Well, that's probably Eddie's philosophy. He been doing so well last season, like Gary mentioned, probably won't change because how successful. But at one point, when you struggle with all these situations, injuries, you need to look a little bit around what's going on.